Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I leave the library and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. I'm taking a walk home in a light mist from the library. Well, with care and attention, I continue to make progress on sharing the games that I've played recently with you. So now it's time for another episode of Board Game Espresso Triple Shot. For those of you new to the podcast, the Board Game Espresso episode is one in which I am going to review or talk quickly about, give quick first impressions of 3 games I've encountered for the first time recently, as well as 1 game that I dusted off. I don't know why I still call it Triple Shot when I'm talking about 4 games, but maybe the dusted off game isn't a shot of espresso, it's a cookie or something. I don't know. It's a treat. It's a treat to go back to an old game. Haha. Take that. Anyhow, I do remind you these are not reviews. These are generally first impressions after 1 or maybe 2 plays. I have not played these games extensively enough to call this a review. And one more reminder as well, I am a part owner of a board game company, and we do a variety of production material. So I guess there is a way in which I am biased in reviewing these games because these are competitors to us. Yeah, sort of. I don't think that affects my discussion here, so I'll let you decide. All right, the 3 games I'm going to talk about today. The first one is a classic, Reiner Knizia's Ra. Ra is often talked about as the epitome of the auction game. It has been published several times in a variety of different formats, most recently and successfully from 25th Century Games in a gorgeous new production that we have a copy of at my game club, and my friend Rob has a copy of, so I don't need to get my own copy, but I'm kind of jealous of these. It's such a good game. But anyhow, Ra, like I said, is an auction game. You play some sort of Egyptian nobility, and your goal is to build up the Nile area. And you do that through these auctions, and the mechanism in the game is very clever. So the game is done in a series of auctions, and each player gets a couple discs, and those discs have bidding amounts on them. Everybody starts the game with a high disc, a medium disc, and a low disc in these different values, and that depends on player order. And then the first player starts an auction by drawing a tile from a bag and adding it to the little auction row. Then the next player can either call Ra and start the auction, or they can draw a tile from the bag. Now sometimes they'll draw a tile from the bag that is a Ra tile, and then the auction starts. But sometimes they'll draw the tile they draw from the bag is another tile to be in the auction, and the tiles do a variety of different things. So it keeps going until either you draw a Ra tile or someone calls Ra. And here I'm saying the name Ra, the Egyptian god, R-A. When an auction starts, so the person to the left of the person who started the auction gets to bid first. And when you bid, you have to put one of your bidding tiles out in front of you to say, I'm bidding this much. So you can't choose how much you bid. You have to bid one of your bidding tiles. Then the next player can either bid a higher tile, and the thing is, all the tiles are different, so you never could bid the same amount. It's just not possible. So they can bid a higher tile or pass. And the bidding goes around the table 1 time, ending with the person who started the bid. Once the bidding's done, whoever put out the highest value bidding tile wins the auction. They take all the tiles that were in the auction, and then they place their bidding tile up in the auction area. And now the next auction will also include the bidding tile that the previous player won the auction with. Following me? So if I bid 10 on this auction and I win the auction, then we take the 10 chip that I used to bid, we put that into the next auction. And I win, if it's the very first auction of the game, I win some chip. I don't remember exactly what. I win a chip with the auction. Then the chip that I won goes face down on my mat. I can't use it again this round. Then we start another auction, or we start another build up to the auction and another auction. You keep going until everyone has used all 3 of their bidding tiles. I think there might be a way to sacrifice a bidding tile and not win an auction and you do something else instead. I don't quite recall. But the central crux of it is that when you bid, then the next auction, the tile you bid with is going to be in the auction. And the 3 tiles that you win in your 3 auctions that round are the tiles that you use in the next round. So it's a pretty clever mechanism to drive the way that the auction values move around the table. And then the auction itself is a sort of set collection deal where there are a variety of different scoring conditions based on which tiles you have and how you have them and when you have them. There are some tiles with different symbols and you're trying to collect a mix of different symbols. There's some tiles that pay off only when you have other tiles, and so on. At the end of the round, most people discard some of their tiles, although some other tiles stay around. Those ones usually are game end scoring, meaning you didn't score any for them now, and you score stuff for them at the end of the game. I'm not sure that was a good explanation. It was maybe too detailed for an audio podcast where you can't see the product, but boy, Ra is really good. Like, about halfway through the game, everybody was just like, man, there's a reason people call this a classic. It is really good. That said, my family does not like auction games, and auction games are not my favorite. Like, I could recognize why Ra is amazing, and I will happily play it anytime someone suggests it. But I don't think it would go over well with my family. My wife does not like auction games, and so I think it's probably not a good fit for my collection, but boy, I'm glad to play it, and I'm looking forward to the next time I get a chance. That's Ra, a modern classic from Reiner Knizia. All right, the second game I'm going to talk about is Dungeons & Dragons Bedlam in Neverwinter. This is a game that was given to my son by one of our friends for my son's birthday. It is ostensibly a kind of mystery solving or escape room game combined with some Dungeons & Dragons mechanisms. In the game, at the beginning, you pick one of 6 characters. Each character has a mix of skills that they are good at. Unlike a regular Dungeons & Dragons game where you have 6 stats, in this one you just have 2 stats that you're good at and you get a bonus when you roll your die. There are a number of challenges throughout the game. Whenever you take a challenge, you roll a 20-sided die, and then if you have the appropriate stat in that challenge, then you also roll a 6-sided die and add that to your 20-sided die. Many, if not all, the challenges are combat. So these creatures will show up and you attack them. Some of them are susceptible to people with different bonuses. And then the rest of the game is played on these big tiles that have numbers on them, similar to Seventh Continent, actually. Only when you go onto the number, instead of reading something out of a book, you find the card that matches that number and read the card. Some of the cards will have story elements and choices. Maybe there'll be a die challenge or something. And a lot of the cards are clues toward different puzzles. And it's very new puzzle game friendly, because it'll have like, this is puzzle C, and you have 2, this is number 1 of 3, and you need to find all 3 of 3 before you can do puzzle C. So that kind of hand-holding is there, and it's fine, but it does a little bit get in the way of making the game feel like a challenge. This is a very entry-level game for people who like mystery solving or that sort of thing, but it was still fun. We played all 3 chapters. It was a good time. Like I said, it wasn't that difficult, in part because the game really holds your hand in a lot of how the game is going to function stuff. It does not solve the clues for you, but the puzzles we found to be pretty simple. In fact, I had a couple times where I solved the puzzle and I held off saying the answer so other people could get a chance to look at it. Like, I looked at it and I knew what the answer was because I'm super smart. Well, no, it's not that. That was the nature of the puzzle. So the characters were neat. The art is good. The game is immersive and thematic. It's just very light and not difficult. But if you were going to play with younger players, like 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old maybe, or you just want a light puzzle game to solve, I think that D&D Bedlam in Neverwinter would be a fine game to play. It also is resettable, so you could pass it on to other people when you're done with it, with just a little bit of management of pieces. So my revisit for the episode is Glory to Rome. Now, Glory to Rome is a game I had for a long time. I have a homemade copy that I made with a print and play edition. And then I played it one time. And I had fun with it. I thought it was cool. I never got it out again, which is a little bit of a bummer, but that's okay. Finally, I did bring it to Toggle and got a chance to play it with 4 other people. And it was a really good time. A lot of fun, Really interesting mechanisms, lots of fun interchange. It's very fighty as is expected, and we had a lot of good time playing it. If you haven't played, it's a multi-use card game by Carl Chudik, in the vein of Innovation or Matainai or the lesser-known Impulse or the brand new Aegean Sea. These are games where you have cards that do a bunch of different things, and a lot of the cards have powers on them that go a little crazy, and so the fun of the game is sort of finding ways to make the most of what you have and outthink the other players. It's a good time. Really enjoyed it. Glad to get back to the table and hoping to do so again before another few years have gone by. That's Glory to Rome by Carl Chudik, and I think printed by Carl Chudik, and I can't remember the name of his partner. If that game ever comes back into print, I will certainly buy a copy. Finally, the last game I want to talk about today is Everdell Farshore. Now, you know that I'm a big fan of Everdell. My wife and I enjoy all things Everdell. We have the complete edition with all the expansions, and we enjoy playing that occasionally. Well, so when Everdell Farshore was announced, it was an obvious addition to our collection, and it turns out to be pretty fun, with the exception of the scoring condition. If you've played regular Everdell, Everdell Farshore is very close to the same game. A lot of the same powers show up on new cards. It's all new art, and it's slightly redesigned. There are a few differences in the rules. There are these ships that do things that you don't see in other cards, but generally it works the same as the other game, with one exception. The traveling achievements that are a key part of regular Everdell, you get like 3 or 4 or 5 points from them. In Everdell Farshore, the traveling components are or can be a huge part of the game, because the way they work is that they multiply by how many you have. So the more you get, the more points they're all worth, and that can quickly add up to a whole lot of points. This is one of those places where I'm not sure where the disconnect was, but when I taught my wife this game, I explained that, and I meant to really emphasize these are worth a lot of points, and she ignored them almost completely, and I ended up just getting a whole bunch more points than her because I took these pieces that I said, hey, these are worth a lot, and I felt kind of bad about it after, because she was pretty salty because she hadn't realized how many points they were worth. And that's one of those things, like, sometimes there's something where you intuit it from the rules, or you understand it if you're the one learning it, but it's very hard to explain to other people in a way that helps them really understand it. And that's kind of what happened with us in Everdell Farshore. I hope I'm going to be able to get it back out again. That first play wasn't great because of that misunderstanding about the final scoring. But the cards are neat, the components are neat. You get these little anchors that are super cute, these little shells. Top-notch component from, I can't remember what the company's now. It used to be Starling Games, but they changed their name. Tabletop Tycoon, that's what they're called now. So if you are interested in Everdell, I recommend Everdell Farshore. It's a nice addition or expansion or whatever, next version of Everdell. But it is really important that you work with your players to understand that final scoring, particularly of those traveling cards, because it's pretty intense. And with that, I have arrived home, which brings me to the end of the podcast. I want to say thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking to you about games. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so by going to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and visiting our forum there. You can also send me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or a Board Game Geek direct message, a geek mail, by going to Board Game Geek and messaging Wombat929. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the day. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. So, if you've played regular Everdell,
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.